Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on considering community development in the third dimension. I'm Karen Stewart, and here with me today is Sue and Yeti Goldner. I'm really happy to see so many people on this webinar today. For those of you that haven't attended one of our webinars, we're recording the session, and we'll email you the recording along with a PDF of the slides after the webinar. If you have any follow-up questions about this webinar, please contact Sue or myself. If you have any questions about the content we're presenting, please use the Q&A panel. Be sure to choose Ask All Panelists. Type your question in the box and click Send. We'll also pause throughout the webinar to take questions, and then again at the end. Please type your question in at any time throughout the webinar, though. That would be really great. All right, so in today's agenda, this webinar we will focus on several specific topics related to 3D and community development. First, we'll take a quick glimpse into how you can easily generate a real-world 3D model of your city or your community that can be accessed by staff, contractors, and people across your organization. Then we'll learn how to use data indicators to review current and future social and economic conditions, assess your physical and administrative infrastructure, and apply the real-world context behind your data to improve planning and decision-making. Lastly, we'll learn how to apply 3D GIS across multiple domains, configure 3D maps and apps to communicate complex ideas, gain new insights, and make more effective and better informed decisions. And we'll do this using some real-world examples. So right now, we're going to do a poll, and Sue has put it up there for us. What we want to know is if you've seen the use of citywide 3D base maps, zoning, and capacity analysis tools, and community engagement web apps before. And also, we want to know if your organization publishes maps created in ArcGIS Desktop to the web. If you can answer the polls, that would be fantastic. We'd like to just get an idea of how many people have already used this, and that would be really helpful. Hoping today that you'll learn a little bit and we'll have a little bit of fun. Sue and I have some exciting demos to show you, or Sue has some exciting demos to show you, and I'm really excited about that. All right, it looks like a few of you have seen citywide or used citywide 3D base maps. I don't know if you guys can all see the poll, but we have about 26 of the people, or a third of the folks, have not used them, so this is exciting. And some organizations have published maps created online, and some have not yet. So you should be a good session for you all. All right. Well, let's get started with our first section, where we'll take a look at generating a real-world 3D model of your city. A 3D system of record and central point of your organization will be your 3D model, a model of the real world that provides an engaging and intuitive interface for visualization, analysis, monitoring, and sharing. With ArcGIS, you can establish a 3D GIS for your organization that lets you explore, capture, and model reality, plan the future, perform spatial analysis, and share information and engage with your stakeholders. 3D GIS builds on your existing data and infrastructure to help you apply 3D visualization and analytics to create a model of your environment. So with it, you can integrate data from many sources, use the data to represent urban form and structure in 3D, review your current and future social and economic conditions, assess your physical and administrative infrastructure, and apply the real-world context behind your data to improve your planning and decision-making. So ArcGIS provides the core software that is complemented by targeted maps, tools, and apps that support the community development and planning process. So during this session, we're going to show you how you can build a 3D base map of your community. So building your 3D base map visualizes your city in both 2D and 3D, replacing static maps and architectural renderings with interactive 3D models of buildings, terrain, even urban trees. It is the foundation for establishing a complete 3D system of record that can be accessed by staff, developers, and your community. In the workflow we're going to show you today, the 3D models are derived from your existing building footprints and LiDAR data. With this foundational base map, staff can explore, iterate, and analyze scenarios in their real-world 3D context, which will help them make more informed planning decisions. So using this 3D base map, you can create web scenes to engage developers, administrators, and citizens in the planning process. But how do you get started? And where do you even start looking for solutions? The workflow we're going to show you today uses ArcGIS Pro to build your 3D base map. The workflow also uses additional resources available to you from ArcGIS Solutions. These solutions are accessible online and it's a growing collection of over 400 free and supported templates and configurations included with ArcGIS that enable typical workflows in a set of industries. The site is organized by industry, and today we're going to look at some of the solutions that are located in local government, in particular for planning and development. The apps and maps on ArcGIS Solutions are updated frequently. I think it's approximately about 4 times a year, and it includes new content as well as enhancements to the existing solutions. These updates are listed on each of the solutions pages, but the ArcGIS blog is a good place to get the updates. And we provided a link to the blog on this slide. So you can view the posts for all solutions or filter by industry to just view local government in the blogs. So next, I'm going to pass it over to Sue, and she's going to take over, and we're going to do our first demo. Back to you, Sue.
Thank you very much, Karen. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to take you through this workflow on how we can create our 3D buildings pretty well from the ground up. And as Karen mentioned, we are going to use ArcGIS Pro and some additional solutions that are from our ArcGIS local government solutions, in particular the 3D base maps. And I'm also providing a link to this extract roof form tutorial, which will give us some more detailed workflow. And I'm actually going to go and share my screen with you. And I'm going to show you these solutions right now. You should be able to see my screen. And here I am, solutions.arcgis.com, and the local government 3D base maps. Now, just to talk a minute about what you get with the solutions, if you scroll down, you can see the requirements. So we are using ArcGIS Pro for our desktop with the Spatial Analyst and 3D Analyst extension. These extensions provide some of the tools in the workflow we're going to be using today. And you also do need an ArcGIS online subscription or either your enterprise, which is your portal for ArcGIS. This is so you have a site to host your base maps, which is going to be in our workflow a little bit later. So what do you get with these solutions? You get some local maps. So you have a number of different ArcGIS Pro maps that are going to be used to create 3 different levels of detail, up to you depending on your data, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. You also get the toolboxes, which just bring together the tools. Again, these are ArcGIS Pro tools, but I'll show you in the demo how a complex workflow is strung together by using this solution. And you also get sample data. So what I recommend is if you're new to using these type of solutions, you never built your 3D base map from scratch or your buildings, download the data sets and run through the tutorial. The tutorial is accessed from this Getting Started part of the page, and it will tell you a little bit about what these 3 solutions are. So there's 3 different types of scenes you can build, depending again on the level of detail you have. have. So there's a basic scene, there's what's called a schematic scene, a level of 2 detail. This is actually the one I'm going to show you today. So the LiDAR data that I've downloaded from the City of Nanaimo Open Data, for example, is detailed enough that we can go ahead and build this type of scene. And then there's also a more detailed, realistic government scene. I'll show you some examples of this a little bit later. Again, the tutorial would give you the data sets and the workflow to go through all of these. And we mentioned that extract roof form process. That's a little bit, the toolboxes for this process are provided as part of your download, but there's a bit of additional information in this tutorial on how it does it. Again, we'll run through how it works. And I've also provided a link to this site, this learnarcgis.com. There's a lot of free tutorials and data. Again, this extract roof form link for municipal development, we'll be talking a little bit about it. It just gives you more detail on how this process works. So let's get right into the demo. So just to start a little bit about the data, we've gone out to the Nanaimo Open Data Catalog. They've provided a lot of open data for their city, and in particular, we've downloaded the building footprints and a couple of other data sets, and also their LiDAR data. So LiDAR data was captured for the city in the year 2016, along with some aerial photos at a spatial resolution of 5 centimeters. And as many of you know, that LiDAR, light detection and ranging, is an optical remote sensing technology. It uses laser light to density sample the surface of the Earth, and it produces very high resolution X, Y, and Z measurements. So this can be a very cost-effective alternative to traditional surveying techniques for capturing elevation and all your data sets. So it produces a mass point cloud data set that you can use in ArcGIS Pro. So just again about our data set today, the way Nanaimo is organized, they have tiles for different areas. I went into the downtown area and I actually downloaded this LiDAR data. So we're going to go right into my ArcGIS Pro project, and we're going to be working with the data that I've downloaded. First, we're just looking at the 2D data sets. So I just have a base map in the background here. Here are the building footprints, and I've actually downloaded these. I think they were in shapefile, I can't remember, but I put them in a file geodatabase just for, again, working on my local drive. And if you notice that I just have actually, for my footprints, I don't have a lot of attribute information for these. I just have basically the footprint itself. And what we have actually in this 3D base map, so in ArcGIS Pro, you can work with 2D as well as 3D, is we have those LiDAR data sets. So they come from the city as an LAS file, again, just the point cloud data set. Now, sometimes I may run into display issues. There's actually 24 million points in this point cloud, so it's quite a large data set. And if I show you in the contents here, you can see the values for the different data sets. There's actually 4 data sets that comprise this area because there's just so large to download. You can kind of see more accurately, here are the points. The points all have an XYZ coordinate, so they capture the elevation. I'm actually looking at the tallest building in Nanaimo with an elevation of 80 meters here. So that's going to be my other source of information that I'm going to derive all the information for my 3D base map here. So we have the data sets. Now we need to use those tools. So I mentioned those local government tools that I've been showing you. Well, how do we use those? In our catalog here, we've actually downloaded the tasks that string together the workflows we're using here. So just a little bit about tasks. I'm just going to open up this one task here. A task in ArcGIS Pro lets you string together a complex workflow, and you build them using this task designer tool. I'm just going to open up the first task and show you how this designer works. And basically, this lets you string together all the different functions that build up, all the different steps that will build up this task. So you can put in all kinds of information, including instructions. So you're not just giving someone a set of tools to use, you're giving them like a tutorial. And these tasks, once you build them, you can also specify whether your task steps will be automatically run, if they need user input to put in parameters, if they're optional, and so on. And they basically will make a complex workflow. Just someone has to step through the task, and they'll be able to go and do anything like what we're doing today, building a 3D base map, for example. So we're just going to go through these briefly. I have to say I've had to run most of these tools ahead of time. Some of them took a very long time. Again, we're working with 24 million points in our original data set, but I'm going to walk through and tell you what they're doing. Again, follow those 2 tutorials that I've provided the links on the previous slide, and you'll be able to recreate this with your own data if you'd like. So the first tool takes those data sets, those last files, and we'll pull them together into an LASD data set. So again, the way the tools work is you just have to put in your input files. You can click for more information. In this case, we had to go and locate all those input files and just add them and specify an output data set, and it reads some coordinate system information and so on. So once we run that tool, we end up with this Nanaimo LASD file. Again, it's pulled all those LiDAR data sets together into one massive file. You can see again the elevation, which is important for capturing our buildings and so on. You can see we have some elevation points here that are below zero, so those are the points that again are in the water. And you also might have some points that are outliers, so you might have things like birds and planes and so on that are captured by the LiDAR, but they don't actually represent buildings or trees. So the next step in our task, if you were following this workflow, would be to locate and classify these outliers. Again, the steps give us the information that we need to go and look at the data set, and we need to determine those minimums and maximums. So again, I showed this point here, the highest building in Nanaimo, about 80 meters. What I've done is run this classification tool, and then you end up with a data set that you've removed all these outliers from. So I've kind of simplified the process again. I could spend a day teaching you how to do this, but we're trying to just give you an example of what you can do in the webinar. So we now have these outliers. This is a very large data set. I think I removed something like 4 million points, and it sometimes hangs my computer if I draw it up, so I'm not going to do that in the webinar. We've removed that. Now we have this LiDAR data set that we can now work with. What are the next steps in creating our 3D base maps? Well, we're going to go and create some elevation models. Again, for creating a 3D base map and a 3D scene, we need a source of elevation, and we need to have that information, that elevation information to derive our 3D buildings. So we're actually going to create 3 different types of elevation layers. The first one, just going to go to the next step here, with a filter on the LiDAR data set, is a digital terrain model, and this we've already created in our contents. The digital terrain model will give us the values of the height of features on the ground or bare earth, so only the topography. And you can see it in 3D in my view here because I'm actually using it to provide the elevation for my 3D scene here in ArcGIS Pro. The next step was to create a digital surface model. So a digital surface model includes the trees and canopy and buildings and so on, not just the surface. And then finally, we create what's called a normalized digitized surface model. It takes those 2 previous models and subtracts the values in the terrain model from the values in the surface model to show the height of the features above the surface. We have those 2 layers here as well. You can see that the darker areas are the lower elevation. So we have our DTM, our DSM, you can kind of see the buildings in here, and also our normalized DSM. Again, just clicking through the task, you create these elevation models, and at this point, we're actually ready to go in and create our 3D buildings. So we go on to the next step. Again, we're just following through the tasks, and this is called the extract roof form of the buildings. Again, if you want more details, the second tutorial that I provided a link to lets you know how to do that. Again, there's some help in here for you, and we just have to input our sources. Our 2D building footprints, there's no attribute information in there, it's just a shape. Then our surface models, a digital surface model, digital terrain model, normalized digital terrain model. Now there's some basic parameters in some of these tools. Again, there's more help if you want to read up on that, and in the real situation, you would probably spend a lot of time analyzing your data and just making sure, reading up on it to make sure that you're actually going to capture those buildings. But things like your flat roof area, your slope roof area, and your roof heights, we'll just use the defaults in our case. And once we run that, we actually have this building. And I'm just going to change this around a little bit, pick a little bit of a better base map for you to see it. You can see that we've actually pulled out those 3D buildings for downtown Nanaimo, just using these tools. Again, these buildings are just coming from our LiDAR data, so you can see how they correspond to LiDAR. There's a couple buildings that we could do a bit more complex editing to get those multi-level buildings. We've just used the tools to run, and we've created these roof forms. Now, if you want to follow through the workflow a little more, there are some tools to modify your buildings. So basically what these steps involve is actually looking at our building footprints. It's popping me back into my 2D layer here. And I've actually have the building footprints with the extract roof form, just the outlines of the buildings. What we're doing here, and I'll just take you to a bookmark, is doing a little bit of editing here. And what's interesting is I can actually show you the 2D and the 3D base map side by side here. We'll just link the views. So if I zoom into one, I zoom into another. Oops, that's the wrong one here. I meant to do this one. There we go. So what we can do here is we can edit our buildings. Again, we're making sure the building footprint matches what's in the real world. A couple places I've had to split up some of the buildings to make separate buildings because they came in as just one building. Again, I think this is the Coast Hotel. So again, you just need to go in and edit your buildings a little bit. And finally, we save our edits and we apply what's called a multi-patch. And a multi-patch is just converting our buildings into a multi-patch feature class, which supports a little bit more sophisticated feature geometry. So this took a little while for me to do, but again, just following through the task steps will let you go and work through it. Just want to let you know, I didn't do anything with the trees, but there is a step in the task that you could go and pull your 3D trees from your LiDAR. Again, it specifies a little bit of a different workflow. You have to look at what your canopy heights would, and you have to buffer your buildings. So you would follow this step after you created your buildings if you wanted to do your trees. But you could follow this, and then you could create your trees. So now we've created our 3D buildings, saved them as a multi-patch feature class, and we're going to be ready to share them with our organization. But at this point, I'm going to pass it back to Karen, and she's going to take us through for review and questions at this point.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Sue. That was a fantastic demo. Everybody, Sue has just shown you how to create and share a 3D base map of your community using open data from the city of Nanaimo that she was able to download and utilize for this demo, which I think is fantastic. So Nanaimo, thank you very much for sharing that LiDAR data for us. This shows you how you can leverage the value in your LiDAR data as well as your existing 2D planning data to create start creating a digital twin of your community. So this will help you start to visualize current conditions and propose plans, which helps you reduce the time needed to make more informed planning decisions, which we're going to start showing you in the next demo. But we're going to answer a few questions at this time. And we have the first one here is, can the Create 3D Buildings workflow that Sue showed in the demo be completed in ArcMap instead of ArcGIS Pro? Well, Sue, since you're the most fantastic technical person working with me on this demo, I think I'm going to let you answer that question.
Sure, Karen. So again, I showed that the actual solution that you would download works with ArcGIS Pro, but ArcMap, which is an older version of our desktop software, does provide many of the 3D analyst and spatial analyst tools that you saw me using in the demo, including creating your LAS data set, your last data set from your LiDAR files. You can create those elevation surfaces, your digital terrain model, digital surface model. That extract roof forms tool does not work in ArcMap, but if you had some attributes, you could create your 3D buildings right with ArcMap. You can't work in ArcMap itself with 3D data. It only works with 2D data, but if you purchase the 3D Analyst extension, you can then work with ArcScene or ArcGlobe applications. The workflow is not quite as seamless, but certainly you could do it, and I think I've provided a link in the resources at the end on how to create buildings using ArcMap at the end of this webinar. So I think, Karen, I'll pass it back to you. And I think we actually did the previous poll. I accidentally hit both polls at once, but I'll pass it back to you, Karen. So sorry about that.
That's okay. You know what? We got both polls completed at the beginning, and so we don't have to worry about it again. So I'm not worried about that. It looks like we have a few other questions that came in, but we're going to move on because I want to make sure that everybody is able to see all the demos today. And then at the end, we'll get to these other questions, or maybe at the next question session. And if we don't get to them throughout this demo, I just want to let everybody know that we will answer them for you and send them to you via email or after this webinar, but we'll try to get to all of them today. So now that we've created our 3D buildings and we have a 3D model of our city, we're going to move on to the next part of the workflow. Sue's going to look at adding data indicators to review current and future social and economic conditions, where maybe you can assess your physical and administrative infrastructure and apply the real-world context behind your data to improve planning and decision-making again. It's all about creating efficiencies. So for every aspect of the urban environment, there exists in three-dimensional space, right? So buildings, roads, bridges, trees, streetlights, topography, and other key features. So to make effective decisions, planners need a way to understand how these features impact one another in the real world. So what better place to do it is in a 3D model of your community. So by combining data and visualization, you can create a social interface for all stakeholders where indicators are used to analyze how you're doing and how your objectives are planned and implemented. So for example, you can create land use and zoning scenarios, so zoning staff can assess how building height, setbacks, and parking may affect development potential for different zoning circumstances. Or reviewers need to determine whether a proposed building will fit within the existing urban context or obstruct maybe some iconic views. Like, for example, in Nanaimo, you have a lot of beautiful shoreline views, and you don't want to obstruct those views. So, and decision makers and stakeholders need an easy way to evaluate and compare policy alternatives so they can provide informed feedback, make justifiable decisions, and promote participation and buy-in. So that now that you've learned how to create or 3D enable your data, you can use these data indicators, such as your zoning code, to drive visualization and analysis to uncover and share these new insights. So now that we have this well-designed 3D base map, or we're getting there, these come in many different resolutions for different purposes. So the mesh shown here in image 3 is what you would usually associate with something like Google Earth. It provides a high detailed 3D surface with imagery, but you can't really query it. And in the image in number 4, we see a combination of photogrammetry with object-based 3D, where the buildings and trees have attributes, and it can be cartography rendered. And Sue didn't do the trees, but you can, and so they can all be attributed, and then you can start doing some analysis. This type of object-based model can support many traditional 2D applications like addressing, seen in the images above. They don't necessarily need to be photorealistic, so you can see that more textured look in image number 2. And in image number 1, they're untextured, but they still do the same thing. It just depends what you want to do. So now I'm going to pass it back to Sue. She's going to talk about adding these data indicators, and she's going to show you how you can do that in the form of a demo. So Sue, I'm going to pass it back to you again.
Okay, thank you, Karen. So just on this slide, we have just a few examples of the type of data indicators you could add to enrich your 3D base maps when you go and publish this information to share with either others in your organization or with the public. So depending on the type of data you collected, you could enrich your 3D building layers to provide information on building space usage, new development plans, and more. And once you've enriched your building data, you can use some of the zoning and capacity analysis tools that enable you to generate 3D models based on a zoning code or regulatory standards such as height, setbacks, floor area ratios, and others. And you can report on performance metrics for proposed developments such as the capacity for housing or jobs, available parking spaces, anticipated tax revenue, and you can use these key metrics and indicators for reporting, for example, the number of dwelling units and building area and so on. So these tools really enable you as a planner to quickly design realistic land use and zoning scenarios, and we'll actually show you some examples of these a little bit later. So just before I go into the next demo, what we're also going to show is not only adding these data indicators, but how you would share your information. So the workflow starts again. We just finished in ArcGIS Pro. We've just authored our data sets, and we have different 2D and 3D layers that we might want to share. We could share our elevation layer. So we've created those digital terrain models. There is an elevation layer in ArcGIS Online that is available for you to use, and I'm actually using that in the demo today. But you could actually host your own elevation layer if you want to provide more accurate elevation, especially if you've gone ahead and processed the LiDAR data like we have had today. And for sharing, again, you could either have an ArcGIS Online organization, which many of you, if you have our ArcGIS desktop, you have an online organization. You just have to enable it. You're able to share internally with other users in your organization or with the public, or ArcGIS Enterprise, which lets you kind of set up an ArcGIS organization internally. That also gives you the option to host web maps, web layers, scenes, and more, and then sharing. So we're just going to take a couple minutes to look at how we can publish our elevation layers and then look at some of the properties in our web scenes in ArcGIS Online, how we can set them. So once again, I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to go into demo mode. Okay, so you should be seeing ArcGIS Pro again. So we're just showing a couple of data indicators. We have a really good customer example, which is much more sophisticated than what we've done. So again, these are data sets I've downloaded from Nanaimo here, the building permit applications. So you can see the attributes that are available, building permit, type, and so on. We have our zoning as well. We can see the zoning. Again, we have the different categories, and the building permits actually have a URL that you could go to and link on. So we have this data. We were able to bring this into 3D as well. So we have our building permit applications. Hopefully those will show up. Maybe if I change the base map a little bit, I'll make a simpler base map maybe. You can kind of see the building permits. I've actually symbolized them with a 3D layer. You can see our zoning. So you can see again in this scene, now that I'm sitting in ArcGIS Pro, I have both 3D layers and 2D layers. The 2D layers are actually just kind of draped on top of the digital terrain model, so you can display them both together. So there's a little bit of workflow that, again, we'll discuss here. Going back into my tasks that I downloaded from the local government 3D base map solution. So if you want to publish that digital terrain model, there's a couple steps you need to complete to do that. Again, you can walk through the workflow. If you first convert it to meters, that's required for publishing in ArcGIS Online, and there's a reprojection tool. Again, I'm not going to really go through this just because it's not the most interesting thing to demo. And then you need to create what's called an elevation tile package. Again, this is just getting that digital terrain model, which has our elevation for our 3D scene, into a format that we can publish it. And then it's sharing it. So this is just sending it up to our organization. If you notice here in the upper right here, I'm actually signed in to my ArcGIS organization. This is our municipal solutions one that we work with Karen to create all kinds of solutions that we show you guys. And once I share, I can specify who I want to share with. So if I wanted to share this publicly, I would check everyone, and anyone could access this. I could just restrict my sharing to groups within my organization. For example, I might just want to share with my planning group, and then we could work on that, and then later on share publicly. So once you finish that process, there's a little bit of online administration, just publishing that. And there's steps to publish it to a portal as well here. So if you wanted to do that, then we'd have to share this scene. And again, in the interest of time, I've done that. So in ArcGIS Pro, sharing with your online organization is really easy. It's just there's a share tab here you can see along the top, and you have different options for sharing either just layers or sharing a scene. If we decide to share a scene, we would actually share all the different layers of information within this scene. So we'd have to make sure that we edit this current scene we're looking at and get it set up that we have our layers symbolized, we have the correct layers in here that we want to share, and so on. Before we go and share, it just saves us a little time. We've actually done this ahead of time, and I'll just show you what it looks like in our online environment. So here's the ArcGIS Online Scene Viewer. Again, this does not require a plugin. It works right in your browser, and once you've 3D enabled your layers from ArcGIS Pro from your desktop, you're able to share them and provide this basic viewer to your users. So I have signed in here because I haven't shared it publicly, so users can pan and zoom, and sometimes there is a little bit of lag between what you see on the screen, and I'll try and just go slowly here. You can create these slides that allow your users to pan and zoom, and I hope I don't give everyone whiplash here, but you can see that some of these building shapes have been captured really nicely. So again, there's just little tools to pan and zoom. We can see we have information about our different forms. Now, because I'm the author of this scene, what can I do once I've published? I could add additional layers from my organization, and I could set additional properties for each of these layers. For example, my buildings, currently I just have them symbolized by just the plain symbol that I used in my desktop, but I could actually go and look at some other options. For example, actually, I can go in and choose an attribute. So I have all those building attributes that were calculated from the Extract Roof Form tool. So my building height, for example, just really quickly, it's already in the legend. You may be interested in doing this. You could change the colors and so on, and you could just change the properties of your scenes. The slides are really easy to do. You just zoom in. You can do like a pan or a tilt, and you just basically capture a slide. It's already available, and you can give the slides different names. So you could call this downtown. Again, this is designed for once you share the results of your 3D base map with either other users in your organization or the public, you're trying to make it as easy for them as possible to kind of work with this. Some other properties, again, the ground terrain. My DTM is not here right now, but I'm just using the Esri Terrain 3D layer. It works just fine. It is more accurate if you can use your own digital terrain model. Again, the steps are in the tutorials I showed you. I'm just going to save my changes. And as a user, I have a couple other tools I can use to interact. So I could do things like change my base map. These are, again, ArcGIS Online base maps that are available to you. And I can do things like use this daylight slider. Again, this is just an additional tool that's available. We can set this to go in and even see what it looks like today, what the shadows would look like. It'd be really dark at 6, which is kind of depressing. But it's an interesting tool that you can do here, show the shadows and so on. That's the basic scene viewer. So we haven't added too much. This example just has zoning. But what I want to actually show you is a really good model from Squamish. They've provided 3D neighborhood models, and again, these models were constructed using their aerial imagery and their LiDAR. They have a gallery if you go to Squamish 3D Maps, and then you can access all these different scenes. Now, just to let you know, these scenes do use our City Engine product, and City Engine is an additional product that you can do more sophisticated 3D modeling than I've shown, so it provides some rules and so on that just give you more advanced options for doing 3D scenes. I didn't use them at all for the ones I created, but it's another option. So what's really interesting is this Squamish downtown model that they have. So again, they have a whole bunch of slides that you can navigate through, but they have added in their layer list, you can see right away that it's much more texturized. They have the water texturized and so on. They have different layers you can turn on and off, and you can also navigate through these to see, for example, the Kingswood neighborhood plan. And you can see different building usage. And some of these actually have, for example, this Rhodes Cleveland example has a slider where you can compare different data uses. So you can do different comparisons. I don't think I have the layers turned on here correctly, but they've done a lot of work in adding a bunch of additional attributes into their 3D building layers and enabling the users to go and see different neighborhood plans and looking at how different attributes can impact the views and so on. So I'm trying to think of what there was a good one. If there was, again, they have a lot of information here, and I encourage you to go look at it. And I think that's all I'm going to do for this demo. I'm going to actually stop sharing my screen and hand it back to Karen at this point.
Awesome. Thanks, Sue. As always, I totally love your demos, so that was fantastic. As Sue showed in her demo, you see how you can now share a 3D base map of your community, and once it's shared, you can add additional layers, some properties, and then capture slides to make it easier for the people to see what you're trying to show them once you've shared it. So planners can quickly develop land use and zoning scenarios and some alternatives, evaluate if a proposed development maybe fits within the existing regulations, like does my project fit within existing zoning, such as the example that Sue was showing with Squamish. They have a lot of value in that 3D scene that they've put out there online. You can also calculate and report on metrics and key performance indicators, such as capacity for new housing and jobs. So I see a lot of benefits to doing this. So with the zoning tools, you can find those ideal locations for development, maybe shorten the production cycle for plan alternatives, evaluate and compare scenarios more quickly, free up time for additional iterations, maybe help make decisions that promote sustainable housing and job growth. So the business value is the act of the zoning and capacity analysis is an inherently 3D problem. So it leverages the value of the 3D base map so planners can work in the intuitive workspace of real spaces. And I think that's a great business value. It also provides quick reporting on realistic numbers and that are related to that urban growth and capacity. We didn't really get a lot into this, but if you start building your own, I'm sure you'll find a lot of great business values to this, with even connecting that visual and quantitative concepts of that growth to better communicate with all your stakeholders. And Sue showed a basic way to do that, but I'm sure that everyone's very creative, and you'll be able to think of a lot of ways to do this work. And so we do have, I think we have a couple more questions. I'll just answer a couple of questions here. So I have one question here. Are we limited to using the indicators that we demonstrated for you today, or the indicators that were on that slide? So not at all. We showed you a very basic workflow. However, you have access to your own authoritative data, as Sue has demonstrated, and the rich demographic information available to you through our technology. So using ArcGIS and urban indicators, such as maybe population distribution or buildup of density, traffic network, maybe critical infrastructure, you could estimate things like potential air pollution or public health or vulnerability to environmental hazards based on some of these designs or these developments that are coming in. And I'm looking at the time. We still have a couple more demos. I think Sue's trying to answer some of your questions directly online.
Yeah, I'm going to chime in with the question because I thought it was kind of important. Somebody is asking if the 3D scene is a snapshot of the data or is it using live data. The 3D scene is using live data. When I published the data from ArcGIS Pro, what I did is I created not only that web scene, I created hosted layers in my ArcGIS organization. So if I edited those hosted layers, I could edit those in ArcGIS Pro. I could change the attributes. I could add new buildings and so on. I could edit them in ArcGIS Online for things like attributes and delete things, but using the more sophisticated 3D editing tools would require desktop. that web scene is pointing to live data, so you will be providing your stakeholders or your public with access to your live data. So it is live data. The only thing that was like a snapshot was those slides, because the slides just took a snapshot and just was provided for navigation. But the data hosted in these web scenes, the one from Squamish as well as the one I created from my Nanaimo data set, it is live data. If you edit that live layer, you will see the updates. I just wanted to chime in with that one, and I think, Karen, we should probably go on because we still have a few more things to do.
I know, and I'm terrible at answering these questions online, but there was a question, if you have additional questions, can you reach out to us directly? I tried to answer that, but I'm trying to answer. So I just want to say, yeah, please email Sue and I. We'll definitely help answer your questions, and if we don't know the answer, we will find the right person for you. So just, yes, please reach out to us. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next section, which is applying 3D GIS across multiple domains. And we're going to start looking at the next generation of planning tools, I guess. So now that you've learned how to make a 3D base map and use these various indicators to make enhanced planning and economic decisions, we're going to look at some examples of applying 3D GIS across multiple domains. We're going to show you some examples of how planning departments are using various web apps and 3D scenes to complete analysis, such as visualization, so maybe how accessible city transit is to homes and jobs, communicate key long-range planning trends, conduct surveys on new building projects. One of the ones that Sue's going to show you is Bolton, Ontario, and they had used this type of technology to reach out to their citizens and residents. Sue's going to go into some more details, but it's a great way to help them visualize what a new project will look like. It's kind of the new modern way of having a public hearing, I guess. So we're really excited about it, and we're in the future, I guess. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to pass you back to Sue to show you a few of these live examples.
Okay, thank you, Karen. So we're just going to look at a couple of these solutions. Again, we've provided the links on the PDF if you want to go look at that. So we've enabled our 3D base map. We've published the web scene, and we've published these 3D layers as well as any other information we want to share live. And then you're kind of only limited by what information you have and what you want to do with it. So these are some of the applications or solutions that support your urban planning workflow. There's no extra cost for these. Again, they're included with your ArcGIS organization from the ArcGIS Local Government Solutions site. And just to briefly go over them, because I'm going to show some of them, one that I'm going to show you is called a 3D Public Survey, and this again works on top of your 3D base map. And what you can do is engage your community to get feedback from the public on a proposed property development that you show them in 3D. So using this 3D visualization, the users can explore and understand the anticipated impact, and that can give them a better way to give you an answer. The Visualize Proposed Developments app, again, this could be for planners or architects to visualize a proposed development in a wider cityscape. It uses your 3D models, and you can put your new developments in a web scene. And again, the viewers can go in and look at it from different locations, and you can get some more feedback. Visibility assessment can answer questions on how does the impact on visibility from a specific location or a surrounding building, how is that impacted by a new building or a new development? So again, if you have those new buildings in your 3D base maps, you can get people to have a look and give you feedback. There's also some things like the shadow impact analysis. Again, using those shadow tools in the online scene viewer, you can see how you might put a massive skyscraper in and it might really impact a local park or something like that. So story maps, again, we'll look at a story map. A story map is not a specific application to planning or 3D, but you can use your 3D data in a story map. So we wanted to highlight that because we didn't know if you knew about that, but you certainly can. And story maps let you combine your 3D scenes as well as 2D maps with all kinds of text and images and multimedia. So it's really communicating your planning information about your projects or your new developments with your users, giving them a really good interactive way to go through. And I'm going to show you some really good ones that our team in Esri Redlands actually have created. So again, I'm going to switch over to the demo, and we're going to show you some of these apps. So I'm just going to share my screen once again, and we'll go back onto our browser here. And we're going to go in, and Karen, did you want to chat about Bolton, or I can chat about what Bolton did? So Bolton, the Village of Bolton did a study on their Queen Street corridor, and which is an area in continual change based on emerging demands on their infrastructure, and it's a historic village. So they were looking at supporting the policy for the town of Caledon, and phasing in the design for new development to keep with their village's unique sense of place. You can go look at some of these videos that we're showing you right from caledon.ca if you go to the Bolton study. And what they've actually done, and I'm just going to pull this down here. They've created a number of YouTube videos that show you, they've really gone a long way. They're using the advanced 3D modeling and virtual reality tools that the public can go in and look at these different examples, and they can actually get a really good visualization of the impact of the new developments on the downtown core. So again, if you go to the town's project website, you can see different streets view and bird's eye views. I think this is more like the bird's eye view here, and you can see the new development with the existing corridor. So they've really gone far in providing a really good experience for their public to see exactly how these new areas will be impacted. So that's a really good example. So I'm going to show you two other examples. And I'm going to go show you, this is the 3D public survey here. Again, it's in the solutions, and you can read about all these solutions that I had on the slide by just clicking on them and going to them. But this 3D survey app, our education team has created one for the Toronto 57 Spadina area, I guess this new development. And basically they're designed to get public feedback, so they can just sign in as a guest. They don't have to have an account or anything like that. So you can see a few things going on here. So we have a realistic textured 3D scene of the existing buildings. And again, you can zoom in and out, and we can see this new building. It's a big glaring orange thing, but it shows the public, this is what's being proposed. What do you think about it? So things like, do we think the size of this proposed development fits in with the character of the neighborhood? Again, these are the questions that you can ask. Is it your rating? Do you think it's totally suitable? I'm going to say, yeah, I agree. And then, does it block any views of importance to you? And you could add additional comments. I'm just going to say no, and I'm going to submit. And you could actually see different submissions. So you could use this app to just get feedback and just see, again, it's giving the public a view of what a new development would look like in context of a really realistic existing scene that you have created. So finally, I'm just going to show you some of the story maps that our Esri team has created. Let me just find them here. So again, there's many different styles of story maps, and you can explore them. And this is some examples of Smarter Communities, Better Planning, of communicating your plans. And we're just going to do a quick tour of the U.S. starting in San Diego, which is just showing a base map again. Just like in any story map, although it's provided in the context of different bullets in this case, we can do different levels of detail, and it might take a second or two to come through. We can see the low level and then the high textured mesh. So you can provide different levels of detail. It's a little jerky on the screen for you guys, but it's pretty smooth. So you can provide your high resolution 3D base maps. And now we're going to fly over to Boulder, Colorado to look at some examples of bringing in those 2D data indicators and putting them in with your 3D view. So you can see that we have existing land use here, and it's quite clearly shown on the scene. Then they're communicating their trends and objectives for their town, which is they want to make it a desirable place to live. So they're highlighting, all their parks and their rec centers and so on. And then they're talking about communicating some 3 issues using these 3D base maps, for example, flood risk in this case. So they have the floodplain mapped again in 3D. So it's making use of that 3D base map that you spent so much time creating and showing the flooding risk in this case. So some of the other areas that the story map will take you on a tour of. We're going to go into Hollywood, and you'll be able to see the Hollywood sign in just a second, so it's pretty cool. So this is, again, highlighting that LA is a really intensely developed commercial area, and it's undergoing a community plan. So as, again, you click through the story map, it's showing you today's zoning potential, and you can put in charts that will highlight what you're trying to show in your base map. So again, they've actually put this information on their buildings, so you can see the capacity, the population, and the dwelling units. And then we can go in and look at what is the zoning for the future. So you can compare the two maps, the past, or the current, sorry, and the future, and you can see how those change. And again, you can spend a lot of time panning and zooming around on this and just seeing what the difference is. And finally, just going quickly into Cambridge, Massachusetts. Again, they're looking at supporting the evaluation of their future development proposals, and they have some of their 3D models uploaded to supply some transparency for the review process. So this is an overall view of their city, and then again, they provide going into, I think it's Kendall Square area. They have their master plans. So they're providing a lot of information in this story map. Again, these are just pointing to your 3D published scenes and your 3D published data layers, and you're only limited on what you can do in this story map by how much data you have that you're able to enrich your 3D scene with. You can see this one has actually some trees that they've provided, some textured trees. And then the final one is really interesting because this story map for Harvard here is highlighting space management. So that should be coming in on the scene, this building in the middle. You can actually click on floors, and you can see capacity by floor. So they've really enriched their building layers, and you can quickly evaluate each floor for key metrics such as space type, assignment, and vacancy. Again, this is all done in only a web browser. There's no plugins. Just using the latest release of ArcGIS Pro. Some of these advanced buildings are using City Engine, but you're just publishing your 3D layers to your ArcGIS online organization and then using something like a story map to share this information with the public. So with that, I'm actually going to hand it back to Karen to wrap things up, and I'll try and answer a few more questions.
Okay, great. Yeah, the Q&A's working again, Sue, so thank you very much. I always love your demos. So you have now seen some really quick demos on how you can use 3D capabilities across multiple domains, and how using your 3D GIS can give developers, administrators, and the public greater transparency into their decision-making process. I really like the story map, and if you all go take a look at Bolton's experience using 3D and virtual reality, they created that, as Sue said, for a new development scenarios, and they did that in 3 phases. They looked at their existing conditions, then they had initial consultation and did scenario development and design, and then did some refinement, and they had about 3 or 4 different future phases or future scenarios that they used at public hearings for their public. And you could see how a story map, you could create those 3D scenes and put them in a story map and then make that available to your public as well. So some of the processes Sue also showed were how you can assess how that proposed plan will affect and be affected by the surrounding environment, or how you can streamline your development review and reduce the need for resubmissions by creating these 3D scenes. So I think the benefits, some of the benefits are government transparency, citizen engagement, which we're all talking about in it today, and streamline your internal processes and your public review, as well as increasing that understanding and buy-in. I know a lot of municipalities are using this technology for that. So you can visualize new development in context of that built environment to increase transparency, better support your planning board decision-making with authoritative information, and understand the impacts, whether they're positive or negative, on how to, so that you can plan better. and then integrate with popular social media channels maybe to reach some of those elusive demographics and increase public participation. You know, we're all trying to get to the millennials and reach out to more than the people that typically go to public hearings and such. So this is a really great way to do it because it's fun, it's exciting, it's modern, it's new. And then you can organize and analyze all of that feedback. So I think right now we're running out of time. The webinar is complete. Sue, I think you did a great job and keeping on time with those wonderful demos. And so we're just going to, I'm just in summary. In this webinar, we learned a few things. We learned how to generate a real-world 3D model of your city or your community and then apply it across multiple domains. Sue showed you how to use data indicators to apply real-world context behind your data to improve planning and decision-making. And then she also talked about and showed a little bit about configuring those 3D base maps and apps to communicate those complex ideas, gain some new insights, as well as engage with those key stakeholders in your community. So I hope we were able to teach you a little bit and that you learned something. If you have any questions, please contact Sue and I, and anything that we missed, we will make sure we go through the list of questions and answer them promptly so that everybody gets all their answers. So Sue, thanks very much for being my partner again in this cross-country webinar. Considering we're both in 2 different cities too, it was a lot of fun.
Okay, Karen, I think I'll wrap up now. Maybe I'll just advance to the next slide just to.
I was trying to do that. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if you were cut off for a second or something.
I know. I'm trying to advance. There we go. Okay, it's on resources now. I'm so sorry. I was trying to advance.
That's okay.
There's always some technical difficulties, right?
Yes. Okay. Well, I can talk about this one. So we just provided. There is some online training in 3D that is really useful. If you haven't been to our Esri online training center, again, as part of your Esri subscription or ArcGIS subscription, you have access to a lot of free content. You can filter this on 3D, and there's web courses, seminars, and tutorials, as well as some training that's more intensive and you could sign up for and pay for. Karen pointed to the ArcGIS blogs. There is a lot of content on 3D GIS in general, local government solutions as well. You go there for the latest updates. They're always posted. There's something up there every day, so just follow the links in the slide. The online documentation, if you want information about using ArcGIS Pro in 3D, as well I mentioned you can, quite a bit of the workflow, do that in ArcMap. If you have ArcMap for your desktop, it's slightly different process, slightly different tools, but you can go and read up on it, follow the link. And finally, I just put in a link to our City Engine product. That is an additional product, gives you a lot more 3D modeling options, but if you want to do things like Bolton or Squamish, it gives you a lot more advanced options to make those really nice textured buildings. We didn't really go in that today because of time, to be honest, so those are some options for you. And then this is just our last slide. We are winding down our webinar schedule for the year. I am doing one more webinar on November 30th. It's on mobile workflow, not quite related to the content of this webinar, but if someone in your organization is interested in our mobile apps, I will be talking about that. And I encourage you to go to our training website, and you can browse our course catalog for our Esri Canada focused ArcGIS training options. We provided our social media information. We do post a lot of information on Twitter and Facebook about our events and updates and so on. And then finally, I think Karen and I both thank you for coming in our webinar and taking time to listen to us today. I know we provided a lot of information, but again, the recording is available online. If you go to our webinars and go into our resources, you can listen to us and watch the contents that we presented. We will email you a PDF of the slides with all the links. We do have our emails up as well. I've tried to answer quite a few questions. I think most of them I was able to answer, but our emails are here. If you have some questions, you can email either Karen or myself, and we can point you to some resources or give you more information. Again, I think we're just trying to give you an idea of what we can do with 3D GIS.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. That was awesome. And I look forward to hearing from you folks that were on the webinar if you have any additional questions. And once again, thanks a lot, Sue.
Thank you, Karen. Always enjoy presenting with you.
Yeah, I love it. Thanks. All right, take care, everybody. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Goodbye.